In this video, we're going to explore the fundamentals of basic page design. We're going to explore the design mode environment, add some controls to the drawing canvas, and then work with Property Explorer to set properties of those controls, and then manage the drawing canvas by aligning controls and grouping controls, etc. And then finally, I'll explain some of the run mode options that we can also set during design mode. I'm going to start by noting again that we're running off of our cloud server, and we're of course looking at our start page, and we're currently in run mode. I'm just going to give myself a little bit more room here by taking advantage of one of the Internet Explorer options to use full screen. And then I'm going to switch to design mode, and remember that design mode allows me to obviously design the pages. So I can exit run mode either by clicking the exit run mode button on my toolbar, or from the page menu I can choose exit run mode, or at any time press Control Shift R. So I'm in design mode, and I'm going to create a new page by clicking the new toolbar button, and I'm, for the sake of illustration, also going to reset or clear the background image on this page right now. So I've got a nice clean drawing surface that I can use to start adding controls. One other thing that's important to note is that the demo page that we're using for our cloud server does not support saving pages. You'll see that the save icon is disabled. So if you do want to save the work that you're doing as you follow along with this video, you're going to have to use a version of the DataHub that is running off your local host machine or off some kind of a test server in your own environment. Down at the bottom of my window, you'll see I have a set of control toolbars that include all of the controls that I can add to my screen, and it's easy to add a control. All I do is click once on the control, and it will just place a default instance of the control in the center of my drawing canvas, or in the center of my view, and at that point, of course, I can just move the control anywhere I want. You'll notice that as the control is added to the canvas, it becomes selected, and of course that's illustrated by the drag handles, which I can use to resize the control. I also will notice that when the control is selected, over here in Property Explorer, I can see all of the different properties that are available for this control. And it also shows me up here in Property Explorer the type of control that I'm dealing with, as well as the name of the control. And every instance of every control needs to have a unique name within the page. I also see the description of that control, and that doesn't change except by control type. So every instance of circular gauge 2 is going to look like or going to have the description of every other circular gauge 2. And if I wanted to remove those descriptions, I can just go to my view menu and turn off those control descriptions and just clear that up a little bit. So anytime I want to work with a control, of course, I can just look for the name of the appropriate control on my screen, or if I'm having a hard time finding a particular control, I can actually navigate like that and see a list of all of the controls available, as well as their descriptions. So that might make it a little bit easier to find a control. You can also filter controls on filter text. So for example, I might choose to enter the word gauge, and I can see all of the gauges that are available to add to the interface. I can of course also collapse all of my categories, and then, for example, open a particular category to work with. Down here on my with my control toolbars, I can also choose to right mouse click and then hide or show particular categories of controls. So I can turn off all my design time controls, for example, or for that matter, I can hide all of my control toolbars. And then if I want to turn them on again, I can use my view menu, turn on specific controls. So for example, there's the control toolbar down here that shows my common input controls, or I can of course turn on all of the controls as well. So let me illustrate how we can work with these controls by actually adding an instance of a shining light. I'm going to start by deleting this gauge and then popping down here and adding a shining light to my screen. And I'm going to also zoom in on that control. And so over here in the left-hand Explorer or Property Explorer area of my screen, you can see again all of the properties available for this control. And so from simple things like is light on, which I can turn on or off with the check mark, or I can indicate whether or not the light is flashing. So, working with Property Explorer is as simple as either clicking a checkbox or choosing a color. Let me just change the color of that light to something else. So it's pretty easy to simply select a control and then work with properties of that control. Now, in some cases, the property that I may want to specify might be a little bit more involved or more elaborate. So, for example, if I want to choose a color for this light, but really the color that I want is maybe not listed here. Maybe I've got a particular hexadecimal value, or maybe I want to play with some colors. I may not want to choose it there, so I can click on the expander button associated with the property, and you'll see it will open up kind of a more detailed editor where I can specify a type of binding, which is going to be explained in a different video, or maybe where I can choose a different color value. And so in this case, I want to just play with my color, and so maybe what I'll do is I'll play with my gradient here. I want something that kind of looks green, and I want a nice bright green. And so you'll notice that as I'm choosing a color here, of course, it's updating the ARGB, the alpha, red, green, and blue values associated with this control. And of course, the alpha is the transparency. So as I change the alpha value with that slider, I get a different value there as well. So I'm going to, I'm happy with that green, so I'm going to hit OK there, and you'll see that that value, of course, is reflected as a hexadecimal value for that property. If I happen to select the background of the drawing surface, that will give me an opportunity to work with properties of the page instead of a control. So you'll notice that right now I'm looking at properties for the shining light, and that is a control. If I were to, for example, add a circular gauge, let me just add that there, and let me just zoom out here for a second. I'll press zoom to fit, and then I'll shrink the size of this control down a little bit more. As I switch back and forth between these controls, you'll see that the properties that are available change in Property Explorer. So there again are the properties of the shining light, and there are the properties of the circular gauge. And as I click on the background of the drawing canvas, it shows me the properties associated with this page. So in particular right now, you can see that I'm looking at a page that has yet to be saved, and I haven't entered a description for it. It's also been given a resolution of 800 by 600, obviously to accommodate a monitor that has a display ratio of 4 by 3. And I can see other properties here, for example, the background color of the page, and I can change that to any color I want. That's probably a little bit too bright. Let me choose something a little less bothersome. And grid line colors and background image and things like that. And again, we'll talk more about some of the page properties a little bit later. When I come back here to work with these controls, you'll notice that because of the order in which these controls were added, the light was added first and then the circular gauge was added on top of those, I can change the ordering. So for example, I might want to select the light, which it's currently selected, and then I can use my buttons bring to front, send to back, etc. I can also right mouse click on the control and do the same thing. So I could choose bring to front, and that will now place the light in front of the gauge. I might choose to do other things. So for example, I'm going to right mouse click on this light and duplicate that, which is really the same as a copy and a paste. And then I might decide that I want both of these lines, both of these lights to be aligned along their bottom edges. So, I'm going to lasso or group both of those controls and then align those controls to their bottoms. If I want to select multiple controls, you saw that I can lasso. I can also press the mouse button to select one control, and then I can do a shift click to select the other controls. And so it will show me that right now I've got two elements selected, and you can see that as I actually select or hover over the little indicator, the icon there in the lower left corner of the icon, it shows me down in the status bar that I've got two elements selected, including Shining Light 2, or two elements selected including Shining Light 1. And so I've got the standard kind of layering and aligning types of tools available, just like any other kind of a drawing package. Just another thing to notice here is that sometimes you might want a little bit more precision or granularity when working with these controls. So you'll notice that right now, as I move this control around the screen, it really isn't snapping to a particular grid. And let me just start by turning that grid on and going back to the page properties again by just clicking the background, and maybe I want to change the size of my grid to say 50. So you'll notice that as I move this light around, it's not aligning to that grid. Well, that's an option that I can set by clicking the snap to grid property, and I can set the properties using the toolbar. I can right mouse click on the canvas and choose snap to grid, a couple different ways to do it. And as I now grab this control and drag it around the screen, you'll notice that it snaps to the grid. Now the other trick here is if I hold down the Alt key on my keyboard, I'm pressing that down now, as I now use my mouse to move around, you'll notice that because the grid is on, but I've got the Alt key on, it temporarily disables the snap to grid. And similarly, if I were to turn off the snap to grid feature, you'll see that it's no longer snapping. But if I hold the Alt key down and now drag, you'll see that again it snaps to grid. So there's a couple different ways that I can align my controls. The other thing is I can use my keypad. So if I cursor to the right, you'll notice that well, let me turn off snap to grid first of all, and I'll turn off my grid altogether. As I use my keypad, you'll see the control is moving 10 pixels at a time. If I press the control key, which I've done, and now move, it moves 1 pixel at a time, and if I press control shift, it moves 100 pixels at a time. So generally you're going to use your mouse for moving things around, but sometimes you might want a little bit more precision. So I'm pressing control up, 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 and you can see it's moving 1 pixel at a time. Another feature that makes it a little bit easier to work with the controls is when you can zoom in on them. And we've got a number of different options for zooming. You can, of course, just zoom in and zoom out. You've also got a toolbar available to change the zoom anywhere from 10% to 800%. 800 is pretty big. You can also use zoom fit. And zoom fit will always maximize the display, the drawing surface area, such that it fits within the application, regardless of whether I change the size of my browser window. Just a point here that's nice. Zoom to fit is a real good choice when saving a page, so that whenever the operator is looking at the page in run mode, it's always going to accommodate the operator's screen resolution, regardless of what that might be. Now, a couple other options for zooming. You'll notice that if I happen to move this gauge up to the top left corner of my page and I press zoom, 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 you'll see it will try as best it can to zoom in on that selected control. Whereas if I deselect that control and basically just click anywhere on the page, now when I zoom in, it tries to keep the center of the page in the center of the zoom window. Another thing that I can do is use this button here, which is to set a specific zoom focal point. So I'm going to click on that button, and then I'm going to, for example, click right there between those gauges, and you'll see it drew temporarily a little circle there. So now when I zoom in, it actually continues to zoom keeping that zoom focal point right in the center of my screen. And I can turn off that zoom focal point by just clearing it right there on that toolbar. All of those options are available from the toolbar, from the menu, so you can see all the zoom options are listed here. And of course I can also do those, select those same options when I use my context menu by right mouse clicking on the drawing canvas. One other thing that comes in really handy is being able to group controls. So for the sake of argument, I'm going to select both of these lights, and I really want to treat those controls as a group, so that when I move one of them, they both move, that kind of thing. So I can add a group to my screen, and you'll see that those controls are now inside a group, which is illustrated by this blue dotted border, which is a design time border, which basically means you'll notice that when I go into run mode, that border doesn't show up. It's intended just to clarify that those controls are in fact inside a group, and that is an option. So I can select that group, and then over here you'll notice that I've got, for example, show design time border, which I can turn off or on. One of the important things that things to note that's important when dealing with groups is that a group is actually a control. So right now on this page I have 4 different controls. I've got the gauge, I've got the 2 lights, but I actually have this group as well. So you'll notice that if I select, or I try to select this light, it actually selects the group, not that light, because the group has properties itself. For example, it has scaling and alignment properties, and so right now the default scaling is uniform, which means as I try to change the size of this group, that content is aligned uniformly to as best fill that group container as possible. And of course I can change the nature of that alignment, so of that scaling. So I might say that, well, I don't want any scaling at all, or I want only horizontal scaling, or I want to fill the group and not preserve the actual ratio, or uniform to fill. I mean, there's a few different options that I can choose to pick here. I'll go back to uniform. So you can feel free to play with content alignment and a number of other options just to experiment with that. One of the tricky things when dealing with groups is being able to select a control when I need to continue to work with something. So for example, let's pretend that I want to change the color of this second light. Well, again, if I select the group, you'll notice that I can't access the actual light itself. And of course, somebody's going to say, well, you know what, why don't you just ungroup or cancel that group? Well, the problem with that is that when I cancel this group, and I'm going to do it right now, and it will prompt me to confirm, and the reason it's doing that is because any scaling or alignment or clipping or other design time properties that I have set for this group are going to be lost as soon as I hit OK. So you can see that it has pretty much put the lights back where they were, and I've lost the properties of that group, which I don't want. I mean, maybe I set a background color or a background image or something like that for this group, and I'll do that now just for illustration. I'll actually set a color for that group. So I don't really want to lose those options. So one of the things that I can do is instead select the children by using the Property Explorer. You'll notice that right now there are 2 children in this group, and I can see them listed as Shining Light 1, and it shows me a little yellow annotation around that, and then I can maybe select that by clicking this button. So when I now click bang, select child, you'll see it's actually put the grab handles around the shining light, and it has changed Property Explorer to represent that it's actually selected that light. And of course now I can change the color of that light to some other color. Just in passing here, you'll notice that the grab handles for this shining light are white, as opposed to the default, which was black. And the white simply means that it happens to be in a state right now where sizing and positioning options are a little restricted. And that's because when a control is inside a group, you can't change the size and the position the way you'd be able to when it's outside the group. Another neat little trick when working with grouped controls is being able to use your control key to select something within the group. So you'll notice again that when I select the gauge, the properties of the gauge are displayed, and then when I select the group, of course, it only shows me the properties of this group. But if I wanted to use my mouse to select this second light again, what I can do is hover over the group and then just very quickly on my keypad press and release the control key. And what that has basically done is said, ignore the control that was being hovered over, in this case the group, and just ignore that from a selection perspective. And so you'll notice that now I haven't clicked yet, but as I hover over the controls, I actually have the ability to select one of those controls in that group. And so you can see I've selected the second shining light here. That feature becomes really important when you may have a control that's partially or entirely hidden by a different control. So as an example here, I'm going to take this circular gauge and I'm going to place it entirely behind that group of controls. And so you'll notice that, of course, now to select that gauge is a little bit tricky, and so we would have to resort to techniques available in other programs like move this control out of the way, or get fancy with trying to get a lasso in here that selects the particular control that we're looking for, but no more than that. So you can see I was able to actually create a lasso region that correctly selected the circular gauge. But of course, that's not nearly as easy as we might think, or as we might like. So using that little control key technique, you'll notice that I can hover over my group. I'm going to press the control key and release it to ignore the group. And now you'll notice I can press and release the control key again to ignore that shining light, and now I can select the control that was behind that. So let me just illustrate that again, and I'm going to start by ignoring or turning the background color of that group to transparent, just so we can see exactly what's happening. So you can see that gauge back there, but again I can't select that gauge because it's being basically blocked or covered by the group. So I'm going to hover over the controls. I'm going to press Control to ignore the group. I'm now going to press Control again to ignore that shining light, and now you can see that circular gauge is selectable, and so it's just kind of a neat little trick. If in the process of selecting this stuff I kind of go too far, then you can always just hit the Escape key or the Shift key, and it will kind of go back to where it was. Okay, so finally, let me just talk about the differences between design mode and run mode, and I'm going to do that by just adding a checkbox to my screen. And of course, right now, when I'm in design mode, I can't click the checkbox to mark it as checked, because of course I'm working with the control as a designer. Obviously I can come up here and type in a value of say 1, and that's going to make the check mark available, but I can't click it using the mouse. Well, the difference between design mode and run mode I think is somewhat obvious. Design mode allows an engineer or a designer to design the pages, to work with properties, and to create a page that can then be saved and published for the operator. Well, the way that we navigate back and forth, or toggle back and forth between design mode and run mode, is by using this green arrow at the top of the screen, enter run mode. And so you'll notice that by clicking that, I've now switched into run mode, and that would allow me to now work with my controls from a run mode perspective. And of course, Property Explorer is not there anymore. I still do have the ability to zoom out and zoom in on my pages, and I can return to run mode by simply clicking the exit run mode button, which is the same as exit run mode right there. The other thing that's important to note is the the use of the Control-Shift-R shortcut key to toggle between modes as well. And the reason that's important is because we have run mode options available. So right now I'm going to go to the page menu and I'm going to notice that I have two different run mode options. One says use kiosk view and the other says show page information. And I'm going to turn both of those options on. And you can see that they are now both on. And now I'm going to enter run mode. And you'll see that when I do that, I no longer have, I still am in full screen mode for Internet Explorer, but you'll notice that I no longer have the toolbar or the menu bar associated with the Silverlight application. And you'll also notice, I'm going to right mouse click here, that I no longer have a context menu available. So all of my run mode commands for zooming and all that kind of stuff are basically frozen out, and the operator is really more limited to this particular environment. So using the kiosk mode option is a good way of testing to see what this page is going to look like from the operator's perspective. Of course, I do need to be able to go back and play with that option or play with the design, and so I can still press Control-Shift-R, which I'm doing now, and that takes me back into run mode. And let me do that again, Control-Shift-R, and back and forth between Control-Shift-R again. And so that allows me to still play with design mode, switch back and forth, while testing what the page would look like from the user's perspective. One of the other options that I was in the process of explaining was this run mode option called show page information. And I just now noticed that I have a little bit of a problem with my demo in that I forgot, I'm just going to hit F11 here to exit full screen mode in Internet Explorer. I just now noticed that this page, DataHub WebView demo.asp, which is running on the cloud server, has been configured to disallow the page information bubble. So I'm going to just switch very quickly here to the local host version of my DataHub WebView configuration. And before I do that, I'll just show you the configuration for WebView includes a number of different options. We'll talk more about this in another demo, but show page information icon can be set here, and it can also be set in the ASP page. So that's what I'm talking about. Let me just close this, and then I'll pull up here another instance of DataHub WebView, and you can see that this one is running from the local host as opposed to my cloud server. And so when I return to design mode in this page, you'll notice that I have a little button here, or a little bubble that says show page information. And this show page information button really just indicates who the logged on user is, the name of the file, and the title of that page. Well, if I go into run mode, you'll see that right now show page information is off. So in run mode, I don't see that information. But if I instead turn that on, and I'll use kiosk mode as well as show page information, and I press Control-Shift-R, you'll see that sure enough, this button is available, and it would indicate again that information associated with that page. So in some situations, you might want to make that information available to the operator, and that's the purpose of that option. So in this demonstration, we've seen how to create a basic page, and we added a couple controls to our page, and we've seen how we can set properties of those controls and how we can manage the drawings canvas with zooming and layering and ordering and grouping.